Hey, it's Chris coming to you from the dungeon tonight, talking about two more rifles that I've really grown to appreciate and enjoy over the years. And that is the Israeli Galil, right? If you don't know much about the history of the Israeli Galil or Israeli military arms, they were originally one of the first countries to adopt the FAL battle rifle in 308. Which one of these days I'll get around to doing a video on FALs. I'm a big fan of those as well, and have an Israeli heavy barrel. But in the 60s, when they had the 6 Day War with predominantly Egypt and a few other countries of the Arab nations, the Arab coalition, they found that the FAL did not hold up to the sand, the fine sand of the desert real well, and they started having issues. They had issues to the point that Israeli soldiers were beginning to use captured AK-47s in combat instead of their issued FAL rifles. So after that conflict ended, they set out to build their own standard military rifle and long arm in-house to see if they could improve upon the design of the FAL and give something a little bit better. That ended up being the Galil rifle, designed by a guy by the name of Yisrael Galili, which I believe is the origins of the name Galil. He looked at a couple of different features of what was arguably the best AK variant. It was the Valmet RK62, if I have that number correct. I believe I do, the RK62 with the milled receiver, and a very small bit of what they did appreciate about the FAL, which was predominantly the side folding tubular metal stock, probably one of the best side folder stocks that was ever been designed. And they set out to design their own rifle in a lighter caliber, ended up being 5.56, and the rest, so they say, is history with the Galil rifle. Over the years, it's been adopted to a couple different variants. The original was the AR or the ARM. So, all that is the ARM includes the addition of the integrated bipod and bipod cut handle. So this is my James River Armory ARM, built on it's a James River Armory Gallant, because Galil is a trademarked by Israeli Military Industries, or now Israeli Weapon Systems. But this is a parts kit built on an American-made James River receiver for an ARM. A couple of the changes that they did from the AK-47 I'll get into, most notably that you might see, is the upturned charging handle or bolt handle, and the movement and change of the design of the rear sight from being up on the front of the trunnion like an AK to being on the top cover, the dust cover of the Galil. And a couple differences in terms of being a peep sight and whatnot, but the movement of the sight was a big factor. So that is the ARM, or the AR without the built-in bipod, and it's an 18-inch barrel to the smaller version, which is the SAR, one of the smaller versions. So the SAR is a 13-inch barrel length. So they shortened, got rid of the bipod, integrated bipod, and the handguard, shortened the gas tube, shortened the overall length of the system, right, to the SAR. There is the micro Galil, which is like a 9-inch barrel versus a 13 to the 18. And this I purchased originally as a ATI Galeo pistol. I had looked for quite a while for one of the better receiver builds on the market. Tort receiver. I was waiting for Southern Tactical to have them back in stock and get one of their variations, and I waited and waited and waited for months and couldn't find one, and decided I was going to try the ATI Galeo. Bought it as a pistol, filed a Form 1, got my tax stamp approval, found an original OG stock for it, and very easy, one pin. You can change out the knuckle in the back from a brace or whatever you have to an original, or a new version of the original style folding stock on it. So both of them I have really come to enjoy shooting, and I have found that actually I wasn't sure about ATI. They're not exactly what I thought of as a top name in the game. This thing runs like a top. I have had no problems with it in a couple thousand rounds, probably maybe 2,000 rounds I have through it total, 1,500 to 2,000, and it runs smooth as can be. And I have really become a fan of it. One of the things that that you might see different on this is I have replaced the rear flip-up night sight, which would normally be right here, with a red dot mount from Bobro Engineering. They actually have a RMR footprint red dot mount that bolts in to the sides of where the ears of the night sight would go, with two tightening screws front and back right here that can somewhat adjust the elevation but also torque it down up and down with these side screws coming in left or right, and then gives you a RMR footprint mount for a very low profile red dot that allows you to actually still co-witness the iron sights or have backup iron sights if need be. Historically, optics mounting platforms for the AK or for the Galil have been pretty limited. There are some good options from Hillbilly Firearms in terms of a railed gas tube, which I have floating right here for my ARM. The railed gas tube just replaces the standard gas tube rail with Picatinny, locks in really tight, and works pretty well. I kind of prefer to keep my ARM in the original configuration, kind of that classic wood and metal look, but I have this around if I decide I want to throw an optic on it. But outside of that, you were looking at side-mounted scope mounts that would put the optic really high up above the line of bore. It was sitting up here because it had to have room for the upturned side charging handle. This Bobro mount has alleviated that. So I'll talk about that a little bit more and some of the potential downfalls. I won't say huge downfall, but some of the things that can come into play in that. But I'm gonna set the ARM down to the side, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about the Galil SAR. The internals are really similar, pretty much the exact same, minus the length of the pistons and whatnot. So let's take a look at that. We'll talk about the design changes as we get into these and why I've really come to appreciate and enjoy them. All right, so as we get into the Galil rifle, right? You see the magazine catch, it's rock and lock very much like an AK-47. However, it does have a protective wing down here below the trigger guard that was designed to preclude inadvertent activation of the magazine release catch right here. So it's extended on the right side so you can drive it with your trigger finger if you want, but it is still easily activated, and most easily activated in my opinion, just like an AK, where you can pull forward with the thumb and do that rock and lock. Very distinct large lug on the front of the magazine. Right, these are Israeli surplus mags. There are a couple companies over the years that have made polymer versions, but I've found that the metal mags seem to feed and work the best for me. They are getting a little bit more expensive, but they're still fairly easy to find if you look for them. All right, you'll see very, AK-esque style safety, right? Down for fire, up for safe, right? Just like they pulled from the Valmet and the AK designs. But what they did change, and you'll see it on the left side of the receiver here, is that they incorporated a lever on the pivot pin for the safety that provides you an activation with this lever right here on the back side of the grip. Now, it is a little bit unusual and unique because forward puts it on safe, pulling it back is what pivots the safety down and out of the way. It is not the most ergonomic to drive the safety off, right? To try and pull the safety lever back, but it does work very well for putting it on as a right-handed shooter. So you can drag that middle finger, index finger down the safety, right? Just like you would an AK when you're getting ready to fire, you can drive it down, boom, come back to the grip. And when you go to put the safety up, you can use your thumb with that lever driving it forward to kick that safety up. So it does work pretty well for that. So another one of the changes that they made. All right. So, right, upturned charging handle or bolt handle. Another major change from the AK family of rifles that they did. The biggest benefit of that is I can more easily do a sweep over the top, right? If I conduct a reload, I can either go hand dragging over the top of the dust cover or reach over and palm the whole thing to the rear, right, if I want to do that. I can just drive my hand forward, palm it, and come straight back. Now what you may see as I do that with this Bobro Engineering red dot mount is it really pushes the limits of length of travel for the bolt to eject around by hand if you were to have a bad round or malfunction, or to perform that reload and drive that bolt handle to the rear. So it does work, but you have to run it all the way back to the mount itself, right? And basically hit the front of the optic or mount with your palm, or drive it back and hit it with the side of your index finger to get that full length of travel to manipulate that action. If you had mud all over your hands, if you had blood, if you had whatever, there's a chance if you were sweeping like that you're going to smear it all over the front of this red dot if you run this mount versus a railed gas tube mount. So potentially one of the downsides to it. However, being mounted back here, you're not going to have the heat issues that you potentially would have with a railed gas tube as you shoot a lot of rounds and it heats up. One of the unique things about this mount is it's actually offset, and you may not be able to tell specifically in the video here that the red dot itself is offset to the left, right? This way, just enough to provide clearance of the bolt handle. If I can drag this back, right there. I mean, it misses by maybe a 1/16 of an inch or a little bit less of hitting the optic and the mount. So while it's an RMR footprint, a lot of people run hollow suns with the RMR footprint mounts. I initially threw one of my hollow suns on here, and it would actually rub the outside of the battery tray, being a side mount battery tray. So it really is RMR footprint. You're gonna need something with a top mount battery tray that if it's not an RMR, to make sure that you are not getting contact with that bolt handle. So the rear side aperture has two different apertures, right? One for I believe it's a 300 and a 500 that you can flip back and forth, right? And if I am running the night sights that would come on here originally, the tritium was long since dead. They're just a U channel flip up. You just drive a center point where these two apertures flip out of the way. You can look right through it and see the ears of the night sight as you use that in lower light or extreme close quarters. So when I'm running this red dot, I tend to keep that in the same configuration, kind of flipped in that center pivot where you don't have either aperture. Makes it real easy to operate that red dot. So with moving the rear sight from the front trunnion area of an AK to the actual top cover itself, and one of the things that they had to do was really reinforce the back end and strengthen the top cover so it would hold tighter to the receiver to minimize shift in zero or shift in your iron sight, your rear iron sight. So you may notice the back side of this top cover compared to an AK has an extra reinforced section around the back of it, as well as the takedown, the recoil lug assembly here on the back side of the recoil spring is longer. When you get into the South African versions, the R4, 5, and 6, it is even longer still. And that was because during design and testing, when they were launching rifle grenades, they're actually having top covers fly off because this would kick forward under the recoil and the rifle would kick to the rear and your top cover separates. So they ended up lengthening these out compared to a standard AK design. So to disassemble this thing, all right, that safety I got down, just like an AK, you're going to drive it down forward. You're going to have a little bit more tension as you pull that top cover off because it fits a lot tighter because of the requirement for having a good rear sight that's not going to shift around a whole lot. All right, other than that, it's stamped sheet metal just like an AK. You might get a little bit better view here of the reinforced sections along the back, right, that give a little more strength to the top cover of the Galil series of rifles. All right, as you get to the inside, other than the fact that I have a buffer tech in here, it is AK-ish almost all the way around, right? Looks just like it would an AK. Drive forward, up, bring it back. You got your recoil assembly, comes out just like an AK. But you will see a slight difference here. right? With an AK, you have that little takedown lever to separate the gas tube from the rifle itself. On a Galil, as you remove that bolt, right, you can pull it to the rear, pops up just like an AK, the bolt in the carrier. What you'll find is the gas tube itself separates out and fits into two little winged ears right here at the front of the rear receiver. Right? It matches two little wings on the rear of the gas tube, and when you go to reassemble it, it just slides right into those two little notches that are cut in the front of the receiver. I can do this easily here without using too many hands. Slides forward, and boom, it's in. So there's no lever to flip on the front of the trunnion area like it would be on an AK, just in front of the rear sight where you pivot it out of the way. It just slides straight back. The dust cover is what holds the gas tube in place on a Galil rifle, right? And that is your pretty standard takedown. If I wanted to go further, right, just like it would be on an AK, I can flip my little pivot lever here for this tension pin, drop my handguard cap forward. I have a barrel clamped Picatinny mount here if I want to throw a light on it. But if that wasn't there, this front clamp slides forward and I can drop my whole handguard assembly down and out of the way. All right, so you can see very AK-ish on the trigger. I know a lot of guys might do some slight modifications to put some of the ALG AK triggers into their Galils. I got no complaints about my Galil trigger at all, so I haven't bothered to do that yet. I'm not sure if I will. One of the things that you will find if you ever shoot a Galil is they are pretty heavy overgassed, and they're going to launch that brass forever and then some. You know, it's like 30, 40 feet. It just kicks the casing out a good long distance. I am a big fan of tuning rifles to run the way you want them to run. So whether it's an AR-15 with an adjustable gas block, which I have a separate video on gas management for ARs, or in the case of, you know, AKs or a Galil, right? I have opted to go with a KNS adjustable gas piston. Obviously this bad boy's been shot and it's been definitely a little bit dirty, right? Your standard gas piston screws into the bolt carrier, just as you would expect, right? With a pin that holds it in place. Pop that pin out, unscrew your standard piston from the bolt carrier, right? And screw in your KNS adjustable with an appropriate pin once it's threaded in to lock it in place. This KNS adjustable, right, manages your gas simply by rotating this little drum right here as many as you want. I think that was 6 one way, right? I can go back, right? You can feed more or less gas by adjusting this dial right inside of here. So unlike a gas block on an AR-15, which you can do externally, to adjust the gas system for a Galil or any AK style bolt system with an adjustable piston, you're going to be pulling it out of the gun to adjust that, which once you get it set for the ammo that you like, right, or to run on the reliably on the lowest power ammo you have, sure, you might get a little bit harder ejection with some stronger stuff, but I know it's going to run on, say, some old Tula steel case stuff that's fairly low power. And when I shoot my Midwest ammunition, I might get a little bit stronger ejection just because it's got more power than the Tula that I run through it occasionally, the steel case. All right, bullets exactly, you know, AK-esque. Obviously, it's in 5.56, but the assembly portion of it is all the same. All right, so really easy disassembly, just like you would have on an AK. Again, just that top cover being a little bit more tension and the gas tube coming out a little bit differently. Right? When you go to throw this bad boy back together, you can put the gas tube in all by itself and then feed the piston and carrier assembly and bolt all in just like you would an AK. Right? Or you can, to an extent, here, I can just slip it over the piston, drop this down into position, right? And then work my gas tube forward into position, makes it a little bit easier, and then just run my bolt forward. So I can assemble and install the gas tube as it's already half or partially around the piston, drive it down, drive it forward, makes it a little bit easier than trying to feed the long piston all the way in. Now here comes the more challenging part of putting a Galil together versus the AK. All right, it's not the install of the recoil spring, because that goes in the exact same way. It's getting the dust cover on so it's nice and tight, right, without putting a ton of pressure on the tail, the little tail of the recoil spring. So one way to do it, and sometimes it works, and sometimes I gotta try it more than once, is if I catch just a little bit of that notch, and you see that it holds my recoil spring assembly just forward, right? Since I dropped it down just slightly. I don't want to drop it much, just enough that it gives me a little space to get my top cover installed. I can install the top cover front, slowly work it down into position in the rear, right, as I drive it down. And then I'm just going to give one really hard, solid rack of the bolt to drive that tail of the piston up. And it kicks it right out the back. So if you have this driven too far down, it'll actually, when you install the top cover, that'll drop too low and you won't be able to do that. But if you have it just barely hanging on that edge and you run that bolt handle all the way to the rear, right, it'll kick that tail up and through the opening in the rear to lock your top cover, your dust cover in place. So I can function check it. Everything is good. All right, I got no problems there. So that's your basic breakdown of the Galil. Right, the ARM and the SAR are virtually identical in how they come apart. It's just different lengths of the components inside and internal. I really like it. It shoots smooth, especially with that K&S piston, which I have in both the ARM and this 13-inch SAR. It makes a huge difference in the feel of the rifle, the speed that you can just keep that thing on target. It's like tuning a performance sports car, right? It's easy to get a car to run reliable, but when you get to that point, you start fine-tuning it to get every little bit you can out of it while maintaining that reliability. And that's what having that adjustable gas system can do for you. Installation of the magazine, just like an AK, rock and lock, hook it in the front, boom, it's there, and life is good. They run 35 round mags. I have an original Israeli 50 rounder, that are getting harder and harder to find. And I don't really use it much because they bring quite the premium these days in terms of magazines and some of the pre-band stuff that's out there. So I don't know, it's a fun rifle. It's a unique piece of history with my slight little bit of modernization with a red dot mount. It shoots very well. It shoots fairly accurately, both of them, this one and the 18-inch. I mean, they're not one MOA rifles, and they were never meant to be. They were meant to be reliable, military issue long arms that are going to give you that 2 MOA, maybe 3 MOA group with good ammo. And with the dot, that's about what I get. I haven't shot any of these scoped. They don't lend themselves well to being scoped. Even there was a sniper version of the Galil. Not something I'm interested in doing. Think of it as, I don't want to say a 5.56 AK because those exist. It is its own unique design that I find to be a little bit more ergonomic than an AK in a lot of ways. It shoots really well, really nice, and really fast. All right, so the Galil SAR, a lot of fun. It was just one of those cool SBRs that I wanted to do for a long time. One thing I will say is the front sling attachment point does get hot, right? So depending on what type of sling you want to run, because this loop here is part of your gas block up front. I initially had my sling just looped through it, and I'm pretty sure if I had shot any more rounds than I did, it was going to melt the nylon that I had on it. So I just switched over to some of the HK style hooks, the little claw hooks on both the front, little slide up and down, and I did the same thing on the back right here, and it works well. The original Israeli issue slings had a protected cloth covered metal hook or snap link, so to speak, that did the same thing that you could hook on. I got a bunch of these sitting around, so I just decided to use these. Yeah, I'm not sneaking up on anybody, but that's not what this rifle is really designed for, or what I wanted it for. I just need an easy way to sling this bad boy up if I want to use it in a class, shoot a demo with it, something like that. If you've never had the chance to shoot a Galil, I would highly recommend that you try and find that opportunity. They are a very unique piece of history, unique piece of military arms history, Israel's history, and they're just a whole lot of fun to shoot. So if you got any questions about it, about the AT, my experience with the ATI Galil pistol that I Form 1 to the SBR, essentially making my own Galil SAR, it's been phenomenal, been super happy. If you got questions, let me know, right? Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And if there's a different type of rifle that you want to see me do a video on, talk about, let me know. I might have it, I might not. You can drop it in the comments and I'll see what I can do. This is always fun to take these things apart and talk about them. So hope to see you guys out on the range, at some point in 2026, catch a class, and maybe you'll see me bust one of these out for a couple of demos. So thanks a lot. All right. Everybody stay safe out there.